On the 8th of August, Matt Simmons was found dead in his hot tub. He was 67 years old. Matt Simmons was an energy investment banker. He had founded and was the chairman of Simmons & Company International Investment Bank. He was also a big proponent of peak oil theory and had written a book called Twilight in the Desert, which was about diminishing Saudi oil supplies. Digital Journal author, peak oil advocate Matt Simmons dead at 67. This article says he died of a heart attack. Yahoo News, oil guru Matthew Simmons dies in Maine. This report says he died of a heart attack while in his hot tub. WLBZ2.com, Matt Simmons apparently drowned in his home Sunday night. This one actually says, according to the medical examiner's office, Simmons drowned. The medical examiner's office says Simmons was suffering from heart disease, which may have been a contributing factor in the drowning. Bangor Daily News, global energy expert Simmons dies at his home in North Haven. This one also says his body was found Sunday night in a hot tub at his home on the island. An autopsy by the state medical examiner's office concluded Monday that he died from accidental drowning, with heart disease as a contributing factor. Survivalist News, oil industry whistleblower Matt Simmons has been killed. Some people, of course, are thinking that it was maybe a conspiracy, a murder, because he had expressed some views that were contrary to BP's and the media's official position. He was maybe a kind of whistleblower. So, could it have been a conspiracy? Well, I like conspiracy theories, as you know, so I'm going to entertain this hypothesis, if only for our entertainment. Okay, now, who would want to kill Matt Simmons? Well, according to the Yahoo article, he drew a lot of attention with his peak oil theory, but he drew even more attention with the June 9th interview with Fortune magazine, where he predicted BP would be driven bankrupt in, quote, about a month, as cleanup costs for the Gulf of Mexico oil spill mounted. And a week later, his company, Simmons & Company, said they were cutting ties with him, although he had been their chairman up until that point. According to the Oil Drum, Matt Simmons was critical of the oil industry, and one of his big concerns was the lack of availability of transparent data with respect to oil and gas reserves. But surely that wouldn't be enough to get him killed, right? According to the Daily Investor, Simmons says government should take over cleanup. He was criticizing the way BP was handling it, but surely that wouldn't get him killed either, would it? And why exactly are people saying he was a whistleblower? Matt Simmons had given a couple of interviews on MSNBC on the Dylan Ratigan Show. One just recently and one a while ago with Nicholas Pazzi from Wow Energy Solutions. So what was Matt Simmons saying exactly that was contradicting BP and the government's official statement and the mainstream media in general? Well, for one, he was saying that the problem was much larger than they were letting on, that there was as much as 100,000 to 150,000 of barrels of oil flowing into the Gulf every day, and that the live feed of the leak which BP was showing us was not the leak, but a small leak only, and that there was a much bigger leak 5 to 6 miles away, that there was possibly a hole in the ocean floor tapping into a lake of oil under the ocean floor, and that if left unremedied, oil could flow into the Gulf from this for the next 30 years, basically contaminating all the world's oceans. And that the only solution might possibly be to send a nuke down there. So who would have wanted Matt Simmons dead? BP? The government? The CIA? Would it have been a matter of national security to shut him up? And would it even be possible to kill him with something that mimics a natural heart attack? First of all, can you actually die of a heart attack in a hot tub? Canada Free Press, pleasures and dangers of hot tub baths. They say here that despite the warnings that you find at hot tubs that say people with heart disease or high blood pressure should talk to their doctor before going in the hot tub, your risk of actually dying from a heart attack in the hot tub is extremely remote. And although you might pass out if you're on blood pressure medication and you spend too long in there and then get out, too quickly, that you have a much higher risk of getting some kind of bacterial infection from the water called Mycobacterium Mycobacterium avium, but for a heart attack, it's rare. Okay, this is where things get really weird. 4winds10.com, murder by heart attack. Here's what I learned from 4winds.com. According to Washington Post report on the 2nd of April 1979, since the 1950s, the Office of Strategic Services, the World War II predecessor to the CIA, researched on methods to induce death, for example, heart attack, cancer, to knock off or assassinate their targets, so the targets appeared to die from natural causes. And in addition to this, by 1987, the Russians had apparently developed a prototype for a weapon that could kill a goat by heart attack from 1 kilometer away, and the Pentagon had been working on similar projects since the 1960s. Of course, there are also drugs that can be used to induce a heart attack or cancer, but the problem with these is that they can be detected during autopsy, and this is why apparently the military had been focusing more on radio frequency devices to induce heart attacks, and had apparently developed such devices way back in the 1960s. So okay, let's say you want to kill somebody with a radio frequency device. How are you going to do this without getting yourself noticed? Okay, this is where things get really weird, and it starts to kind of, the reality starts to kind of overlap with science fiction. Apparently, the military had developed devices that could make an assassin not only invisible, but also tiny and able to teleport, so that they could take such a weapon and make themselves invisible for when they deploy it. The origins of making things invisible for military purposes actually goes way back to World War II, when Albert Einstein was working with the US Navy on a project to make ships be able to not only disappear but teleport using something called unified field theory. And one famous case of this, well, the famous case, was the Philadelphia experiment, where they applied this technology to the naval ship, the USS Eldridge, and made the ship disappear, reappear in another harbor, and then reappear in the Philadelphia harbor again. So the ship reappeared intact, but for the crew it was a disaster. They went crazy, they were sick, and worse, some of them were when they returned were fused, molecularly fused into the ship. Their hands were fused to the railings, their bodies, some of them were fused into the deck. So this was classified as, above top secret. But all the witnesses were made to sign, sworn statements that they would keep silent about this. But nonetheless, one witness called Carlos Allende managed to evade this and eventually come forward with this evidence. And eventually, a little documentary was made about the Philadelphia experiment on the History Channel. I know it sounds totally crazy, but you got to realize that the technology that we know they have, well, they're always about 30 years ahead, so they don't show us all their technology. But in any case, they do have methods of inducing heart attacks and cancer, radio frequency weapons, and invisibility technology. Okay, option A, Matt Simmons died of a heart attack in a hot tub because he was out of shape. Option B, Matt Simmons was murdered by a tiny, invisible and teleporting assassin from the CIA using radio frequency weapon. But in any case, what would probably give us a clue as to whether he was murdered in any way was whether it turns out that his predictions are right. BP and the mainstream media apparently are hiding the extent of the damage and the severity of the spill. Matt Simmons was speaking out against it. He was saying it was much worse, but what's the truth? That remains to be seen. But if he was right and he really was a whistleblower, then at least we'd know that there was a motive.